webinar series using this lockdown 5.0 period for learning from home. The main aim of the program is to throw the light on has deep learning based approaches made traditional image processing irrelevant? Is it so? To cater the need of program, we have expert speaker Dr. Reek Das, University of Kolkata, Xavier Institute of Social Sciences, Ranchi. Welcome, sir. I extend a warm welcome to all our today's participants. Now I request Professor Dr. Head, Department of Information Technology, PCCU, to say a few words.
Thank you, Babita ma'am. Good morning, all. Professor Dr. Sonali Patil, heading Department of Information Technology at Pimpri Chinchwad College of Engineering, Pune. First of all, I would like to thank Professor Dr. Reek Das for accepting our invitation and sparing his valuable time to guide on this topic. I'm very happy to share with you all that at PCCOE, we have the culture which give us the opportunity, platforms to come, like-minded people are coming together and sharing their knowledges. And like that, at Information Technology Department, we have VIBE as one SIG, through which we are hosting this today's webinar. I'm congratulating all the VIBE members for arranging this talk on topic
Technology at Xavier Institute of Social Services, Ranchi. He is a single point of contact for SWAYAM local chapter at Xavier Institute of Social Service, Ranchi. Dr. Reek Das has over 16 years of experience in academia and research with various leading universities and institutes in India, including Nasi Munji Institute of Management Studies, Globazan Business School, Maulana Abdul Kalam Azad University of Technology, and so on. He is currently associated with Xavier Institute of Social Service, Ranchi. Dr. Reek Das is recently featured in ULEX Wall of Fame, top 50 tech-savvy academician in higher education across India. He is a member of International Advisory Committee of AI Forum. Dr. Das has carried out collaborative research with professionals from industries like Philips Canada, Cognizant Technology Solutions, TCS, and so on. Dr. Das has filed and published 2 Indian patents consecutively during the year 2018 and 2019 and has over 24 international publications till date with reputed publishers like IEEE, Springers, Emerald, Endoscience, and so on. He has authored 2 books in the domain of content-based image classification and has edited 3 volumes with IGI Global, CRC Press, and De Gruyter, Germany, respectively. He has also chaired the session in international conferences on machine learning and has acted as a resource person, invited speaker in multiple events and refresher courses on information technology. Dr. Reek Das runs a YouTube channel named Curious Neuron to disseminate knowledge and information to larger communities in the domain of machine learning, research and development, and open source programming languages. Dr. Das is always open to discuss new research projects, ideas for collaborative work, and for techno-managerial consultancies. Now I request Das sir to start with the session.
Thank you, madam, for this wonderful introduction. Hope I am audible to all. Hello, am I audible to all?
Yeah. Yes, sir, you are audible.
Very good morning to all out there. Respected Dr. N.B. Chopade, Principal in Charge of PCCOE Pune, Dr. Sonali D. Patil, HOD Information Technology, Professor Jaya Diwan, Professor Ashwini Tange, Professor Babita Sonare, Professor Tanuja Patnankar, and Professor Sachin R. Jadhav. I express my gratitude to all of you for providing me this opportunity to present my insights and thoughts in front of you, so that I can have some kind of an interaction as well as interactive session with those who have been present here. This is Dr. Reek Das, has already been introduced by Honorable Madam. I am from the department or the program of Information Technology, Xavier Institute of Social Service, Ranchi. Xavier Institute of Social Service is one of the premier B schools here in India, and it is run by the Society of Jesus by Jesuit fathers, and we are offering postgraduate diploma in management in 5 different disciplines, initiating from information technology, HRM, marketing management, then financial management, then rural development. So these are the different streams where we are providing the postgraduate diploma in management, and we always embrace changes. We believe in putting the last first and serving to the society, irrespective of any caste or irrespective of any religion. This particular topic, which is image processing and deep learning, which is one of the very much discussed topic in current context, is something which has grabbed attention, and we at XISS, that is Xavier Institute of Social Service, have found this to be very relevant. Apart from making money or revenue, it is very relevant to be used for the society as well as to the well-being of mankind. That is why we have taken special interest in these particular domains, which are bringing disruptions to the society, not only to the society but also to the industry, so that we can reach out more and more to the needy and to the poor through this Industrial Revolution 4. So in this particular session, I would like to take a walk through different aspects of image processing as well as deep learning, pertinent to the context that whether deep learning has really made the traditional image processing irrelevant. So to start with, we will be starting with that how a picture or an image is working as an expressive means vis-a-vis the same expression we do with words. So how effective it is while we are communicating with the help of image. Followed by that, what is there any requirement to go for newer technologies or adopting new novel technologies quite often while we are dealing with the ROI of image processing. ROI means we can have in terms of computer science, that is region of interest, and here ROI, what I meant to say is return on investment, right? So we will look into it. We will also attempt to discuss on different kinds of adoption of technology, different modes of adoption of technology, rather I will say, that is crawl, walk and run, and followed by the use of images, why the image is so much popular, and whether at all deep learning and image processing do have certain kind of relations or not, or whether they are synonymous or not. While discussing this, we will try to understand that whether deep learning is really a panacea, that is cure for all, and whether the technique of forming efficient feature is only feasible and possible with the help of deep learning. We will also try to touch upon certain innovative usage, and while we come to that particular discussion, we will look into it, that what sort of innovative usage we may have. I am not really specifying right at this point of time that what kind of innovative usage I will be emphasizing upon. So what I will try to emphasize, or what I will try to cover, is that what innovative usage can we do with this kind of an application. And finally, we will be wrapping up with the conclusion of the entire session. So to start with, as I have said, that a picture is worth 1,000 words. If we look more and more towards the way we communicate these days, if we observe very closely the way we communicate these days, the way we interact these days, we prefer to use, if you think of WhatsApp or various messenger platforms like this. Is it clearly audible to all the participants out there? Hello, participants.
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Can you hear me? Yeah, okay, great. So then, a picture is something which is worth 1,000 words. That's what I am trying to emphasize upon, because the way we communicate these days, you see the different messengers that we use, be it WhatsApp, be it Yahoo Messenger, or be it Facebook Messenger, be it Google Hangout or whatsoever, we prefer to communicate with emojis, right? So you can write several things, but then just with one emoji, you can express a billion of things, a plethora of things. Why? Why is this so much popular? Because this is very concise, the emoji or the image, if you can say, it is very concise yet elaborate. That's what is required these days. You have to be concise yet elaborate. So here, when we are considering communicating with images, our communications becomes concise. At the same point of time, it becomes very elaborate. The process uses images. Since this is image processing, whenever we will be talking of image processing, that is something which we say a complex process, where the technical analysis with the help of certain complex algorithms is being done for the images by taking them as input. Now this term, that is complex or technical, that may be feasible or that may be apt for the end users, those who are visualizing the results. But probably with the professionals like us who are dealing with images, if these words technical and complex remain in our mind, that is not very healthy. And as far as I am concerned, why it is not healthy? Because of the fact, if we do not understand the technicalities and the complexities that is there in the algorithm, we will not be able to enhance those things. We will not be able to implement those things. So obviously, while working or while manipulating the images, while doing the processing, we get to know what are the complexities of the images. At the same point of time, we can enhance the recent offerings, those which are there in image processing, once we understand the basics or the complex algorithm which I am referring to. So these no more remain complex to the developer or to the professional. But then there is a question which remains, that what will make complex easier to the professional? That is being addressed, or that is being indicated or hinted in this particular question. The question being that what insight are you looking for from that particular image? What kind of insight are you looking for? What kind of information you are actually looking for while you are handling or dealing with a particular image? Now, that's what pertains to ROI, or return on investment from the image. As we all know, since all the participants, I believe, those who are from the academia, those who are from the industry, or those who are who have registered here, even people from media who are there probably. So first of all, I forgot to say a very good morning to all of you and a warm welcome to this webinar, since due to the lack of connectivity. But then since now things are moving smooth, so I am wishing you and greeting all of you good morning on behalf of XISS. And so what we were discussing is, we were trying to understand that what is the return on investment for image processing. So why there is return on investment? Because those of us, and most of us, if not all of us, have dealt with images. We know that how much it really takes to process an image. It's not that you just deploy one algorithm, you just implement one algorithm from anywhere with the help of a function and you get the output. Even if you do that, then what you really get out of the output, to interpret that, you need a lot of concentration, you need a lot of literature survey, you need a lot of understanding that what exactly you are trying to get out of it. So you are investing, I am not saying in terms of finance or money. What I am trying to indicate is that you are investing your concentration, your intelligence, your time, your well-being, to understand that what you exactly want from this particular image. So you must be looking for some kind of a return on this investment, or these investments which you are doing. What is that return you will be looking for? The return is the insight that you are trying to gain out of these kind of a processing. What kind of insight do you really get? And this insight, whatever insight you are looking for or you are gaining, is it really making your finding or the research a great one from a good one? What I tend to say by saying this, let's say I am a very amateurish person and who has just ventured into the domain of image processing. So I do not really know much about image processing, but I am trying to understand it. So I will be looking at some kind of ROI that may be very elementary, and that may not be transforming my research to a great research. But then a person who is, let's say, a very experienced person, a very knowledgeable person in that domain, to that person, if the person is looking at the elementary level of the image processing, that also will be so matured that may turn the great research, good research, to a great one. So there, your ROI varies, or your return on investment varies, or your let's say income, that I will say, or your gain varies. The effort you put, probably the same kind of effort in terms of energy, in terms of time, you are also putting being a novice. Experienced person is also putting being a experienced person, but then the output will vary. So the return on investment will also vary. So that is why before investing, it is very much essential to understand that what are the basics, to turn the complex things into easier things, to read more and more, to understand that what exactly you are looking from this particular image, right? So that is what is the theme of this particular slide. Being said this, the next thing is, does it really worth to be a neophile? A neophile means a person who is always searching for something novel, right? Those who are doing research here, or those who are research scholars, or people like me, those who attempt at times to do research but are not very good researchers. I mean, I'm talking about myself. What I'm trying to say, that what do we understand by neophile, that there are certain kind of people who always look for novelty. So whenever you submit a research paper and you get a review, the reviewer in most of the cases asks that what is the novelty in your paper, right? So that is what is the novelty. So jokes apart, what here I'm trying to emphasize upon is that neophile is a person who is always looking for something novel, and here in this context it is being applied that a person who is always looking for some new technology. What do we understand by a person who is looking for some new technology? That is, you see, there are plethora of technology which are coming up. For example, I'm giving you a certain example. Every now and then you will find that there is Python, there is R. Okay. Now, these Python, again, based on Python, you are having n number of varieties. For example, you are having PyTorch, you are having TensorFlow, you are having Caffe. Like that, there are so many varieties in Python and also in R language. Both are open sources. Now, what happens? Now, every time if you go to even your social networking, social networking account, which I am mainly referring here to LinkedIn, you will find that several people are uploading different kind of outputs of their programming with images. Probably someone is uploading some kind of those kind of bounding boxes, kind of identification of different people or traffic with the help of Python, or probably with the help of YOLO. You only look once, right? That is a very popular software these days. So you are wondering that I am learning Python. Now this fellow is saying YOLO. Now that fellow is saying TensorFlow. That fellow is saying PyTorch, and someone else is again looking for R. So am I totally irrelevant? So I must go for each one of them every time whenever I do image processing. Now in all this process, image processing goes haywire, right? And you become a slave of certain tools. Am I audible? Still audible? Hello? So
Yes, sir, you are audible
okay,
and visible.
so image processing goes haywire, right? So we are always running after tools, and at the end, none of the tools we are learning. Now let's say during our research, I'm talking of my time when I was doing my PhD. I have done my entire PhD in MATLAB, right? In image processing, and at my time when I did PhD during let's say 2012 to 2018, got registered in 2014. In fact, so when I was doing my PhD, there was at the initial position in 2012, image processing was there, everybody was aware of, but no one was aware of machine learning. Now when I passed out of PhD, what happened? Nobody is that much aware of image processing, but people is much more aware of machine learning and deep learning. So if I say I am an image processing kind of a person, people will say, what is that? You are coming from Mars or somewhere else. But then if I say that I know machine learning, the same thing other way around, and then people will easily recognize that, okay, this fellow knows machine learning. So this is something, but these two terms are not synonymous, right? So machine learning and image processing is not synonymous. So for the sake of your, making yourself understandable to people, you need to take these words. For example, take these names, in fact. So I have done in MATLAB, as I was saying. Now things have changed, and if you are not really doing it in open source languages like Python and R, you are not really accepted in the market. That is what is the trend here. That is, if you are not really doing in open source languages, you are not a pro, right? You are just amateurish. Python is MATLAB is not really expected here in image processing. But earlier, it used to be, MATLAB used to be one of the most handy tools, right? So there is one open source name, I guess, Octet, which is similar to MATLAB, which you can also use. But then Python and R is embraced more and more these days. So now what happens in Python? So suppose you start doing in Python with TensorFlow, let's say some kind of application, and then suddenly you find someone else is doing in Python, someone else is doing in Caffe, someone else is doing in Theano. So you start and running after all these kinds of technologies to understand, or all these kinds of languages or open source based on Python. So these are all Python, I will understand all. So it is not going to take you anywhere. So it's not really worth to be a neophile all the time and you run after the technologies. You will not learn image processing or rather machine learning in that way. You will only learn certain 2 or 3 lines of codes, that too not in full, that too in parts, and that is not really going to take you anywhere. So you need to be very careful about the crawl, walk and run approach. What is that? We will look into crawl, walk and run approach in a moment. But then you have to be very careful for your propositions while you are choosing for a particular technology to be adopted to move forward for your, let's say, this image processing kind of a journey. So what we really try to emphasize upon is a hedgehog concept, right? A hedgehog kind of a concept. What is a hedgehog concept? A hedgehog concept is nothing but it is developing some simple concept in response to the facts of reality. So a hedgehog is a kind of animal you might have seen. They try to develop a simple concept in response to the facts of reality. I am providing a kind of a real-time scenario by which you will easily understand it. Don't take it otherwise. But then people who are there from the industry and you being a person from academia, let's say if you claim and if you boast in front of the people from industry, I have done a PhD. That is not the case these days. I guess scenario has much more improved due to our responsible behavior. But then even I guess 4-5 years earlier, if you boast in front of, or if you say, even not to boast but to say that I have done my PhD, hedgehog concept is something where if you are into this kind of a concept, you try to develop a simple concept, that is step by step approach. Hedgehog is a kind of animal which actually respond to the real world scenario by developing a simple concept and then moving deep into it, right? And they really do not try to do all at once. So that's what is the hedgehog concept. That is a little bit of management theory I am bringing in between, but then it is equally important. Why I am saying this? Because of the fact I am providing you with an example. Let's say if you say that you have done your PhD in academics, and if you go in front of an industry person, usually what used to happen that they say that okay, you have done your research, that's absolutely fine, you be happy, but we are not really interested because that is hardly going to provide any output to us, right, in the industry. Now, I was actually trying to emphasize on the hedgehog concept. So hedgehog concept is something management I am bringing in between. But then hedgehog is a kind of animal, as I have already saying. I was already saying that which responds to the real world scenario by building a simple concept at the beginning or at the inception, and then driving deep into it with a specific kind of a thrust or specific kind of a approach. So it really doesn't run for all. So it is related to neophile kind of an approach which I was getting earlier. So this hedgehog people, they are very much cautious that what they want to pursue, and if once they once they determine that what they want to pursue, they become very much active into it, or they become very much involved into it, and they pursue it vigorously, right? So once they start pursue it vigorously, they are doing it using the hedgehog concepts. The concepts they develop are something which is simple yet which is very much fruitful. I am providing you with an example which I was saying that a person from academia who has done PhD, and the industry people often say that your PhD is not really going to help us in real time. Why? Because in PhD the normal approach in India is that once you are trying to do your PhD, you do not really look for a problem, you look for literature, right? So in industry, whenever people comes, they come with a problem and then they offer them a solution. But in PhD, what we usually do, we go for the literature. and we try to find out whatever work has been done, and based on that, if we get satisfied with one kind of a work, or we understand one kind of a work from by studying different kinds of a literature, we then formulate the problem on that. So we are not really addressing a problem, we are creating a problem. So the basic difference lies in the fact that you are creating a problem. And I am not really criticizing the process of doing PhD here in India, but then it's okay that if you even develop a problem once you have done the literature survey, after that you are developing a problem, that is absolutely fine, there is no harm in that. But then after that, while pursuing the PhD, or while pursuing the research work, or while pursuing your interest, how really you are addressing this problem? Are you making it a theoretical approach, got nothing to do with the real world, or you are really trying to make it something practical, taking inputs from your surroundings, taking insights from the real world, and then transforming it to a problem which is of value, and which itself make your resume of value. Otherwise, you do PhD from anywhere, that hardly makes any sense if you are not able to reproduce. At least I am telling you in terms of industry, right? Now, you see, it is not a truth in current times. Why? Because this pandemic season, you see, you have done your PhD, let's say in image processing, or let's say in IoT or whatsoever, that hardly matters. It is expected that if you are claiming that you are a PhD or a researcher or whatsoever, you are an innovative or creative person. Now in this pandemic, you see the entire delivery thing, the webinar thing has changed, right? The interaction thing has changed. Now you see how the faculties and the members of PCCOE have innovatively thought of different ideas and have arranged this kind of it's not that they are specialists in e-learning, it's not that they are specialists in this kind of a communication, but then this innovation came to their mind that in this way we can still spread the knowledge without being restricted, and at the same point of time we can also discuss trendy concepts and we can move forward, right? So this is what is expected, or this kind of innovation or this kind of value addition is expected while you are doing. So how we will be able to add value? By approaching or by adding value to trivial things around you. You do not need to add value to big things around you. Okay, you do not really need to create immediately 5G communication or something like that. You just try to add value to trivial things, little things around you. That will build the habit in you to build, to add value to further, it will accumulate to further larger values. Hence, it's more important to work for the concept than for the tool. So if you are only running after tools, it will hardly make any sense, right? I am giving you an example of VisiCalc, that it's not always true that if you know Python, or if you know Yellow, or if you know some new language like Julia or whatsoever, you become a pioneer in that particular field of image processing if you know to apply it. You see this example of VisiCalc. VisiCalc is the first spreadsheet software. I at least never heard of VisiCalc. I don't know how many of you have heard of VisiCalc, but then it is accidentally the first spreadsheet software, but no one is known about VisiCalc. It has lost its game to Lotus 1, 2 and 3 version 1, 2 and 3, and finally Lotus lost its game to Microsoft Excel, which is the undisputed king. So it's not always true that you being the first, because it is based on several things. It is based on your necessity, your requirement, your user interface, your use of the ease you are offering to the end users, the flexibility you are offering to the end users. So the one which is offering the maximum, by seeing that what is going on in the market, will become the market leader, just like Microsoft. You might have seen that during group discussions, there are some people who have always got the tendency, to jump into and start the discussion right in the beginning, as if they will win World Cup if they start the discussion in the beginning. They are talking utter or irrelevant things in most of the cases. But then you will find there are some people who are very quiet in the beginning, probably 2-3 minutes, not throughout the GD, but probably 2-3 minutes. They are actually trying to understand and collect values from different opinions, initial opinions, and try to understand what is the theme of this particular GD. Once they get it in the first 2-3 minutes, they coordinate the entire GD in such a great way that finally they get selected, right? So by saying all these things, what am I trying to say? That even in image processing, if you really adopt something which is, let's say, deep learning or something like that, right in the beginning, it's not that you become a pioneer or a master in the field. Okay? I'm audible? Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Very, very good.
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Okay. So that's what is the funda, that early adoption always doesn't lead to leaving a mark for anybody and everybody. There comes the concept of crawl, walk and run, how you are adopting the technology. So in the beginning, the Hedgehog concept says that you try to understand at a very basic level. With 2 lines of code, 1 lines of code, theory, it will take 1 year or so. At one point of time during my PhD, I have not done any work for 1 year. I was just reading through quality articles and journals to understand that why my work is not getting published in some good quality articles and good quality journals or conferences. What is there? I'm using the same data set, I'm using same kinds of innovative technique, but then people are getting it published, I am not getting it published. What is the reason? So for 1 year, probably 8 months to 1 year, I just gone through certain kinds of articles and try to understand that what is the way of presentation. So that is the crawling stage, right? So in image processing, you need to understand what is image processing, what is deep learning, are they synonymous, you are in the crawling state. It's fine, it's okay that you don't understand, that's why you are going through. So in the crawling state. But then if you just jump into that I know everything, then what will happen? You will be facing a face loss, right? You will be disappointed to understand that people around you will be asking you several questions, several queries, but you won't be able to respond to that. So once you are confident with the crawling stage, you enter the walking stage. The walking stage is begin to integrate the technology with your pre-existing system. Whatever you know, whatever work you have done, are you able to integrate your newly acquired skills, although they are in the crawling state, but then are you really able to apply this to whatever you are already having? Can you have a different vision of the things which you are already having? So that is the walking state. Once you are in the walking state, you need to ensure that whether your concepts that you have newly developed are really serving or helping you to move forward or distracting you from the current focus for which you have learned this. For example, let's say you have learned deep learning for image processing. Now, is it that deep learning is really helping you to understand image processing, or just you are getting more and more into deep learning and are getting distracted from image processing? You are more into understanding the structure of neurons rather than understanding the structure of images. What is it? That you need to figure out. So that is the walking stage. Once you are in a sync with whatever you have learned and whatever you are trying to apply upon, and you are trying to show this to the world, then at that point of time the new technology provides clear advantage in your pursuit of your concept, right? So then you can apply it, deploy it anywhere. You can give presentations, you can offer consultancies, you can collaborate with people, you can do so many things, plethora of things. But then unless and until you are in a position to run, you are in a crawling state and you want to run, you will break your leg. So that's what is the crawl, walk and run adoption of technology in the context of image processing and deep learning here. So then why images are so important? As we see, the text-based content will always going to be an integral part of marketing, in the sense that ultimately why you are doing image processing, ultimately why you are doing text processing. If you are not really able to generate business to the organization, they will throw you away. So it is clearly said that text-based content, not the image-based content, but the text-based content will be an integral part of marketing, that is for sure. So but then why the significance of image processing is there these days? Because this is because of the fact that in this digital era, in this industry revolution 4, it is more important to create your identity, and image is helping you to create that different identity for your brand, for your organization. I am providing you with a simple example. You might have, all of you are having, in fact, I guess, the Google Lens application in your cell phone. What is that? That is nothing but an application of image processing with the help of machine learning. So why it is so popular? Because of the fact it is scanning the thing on whatever thing you are targeting this, it is scanning the thing up, and from that scan it is also providing you the essential links where can you get that product. Let's say you are scanning a cap. You do not know what is the name of the cap, but you really like the cap. So you are scanning the cap. So immediately it will try and find out the relevant matches and will provide you the different links where you can get the cap. And your wish is fulfilled. This is just an example. So this is how the images are creating identity for a particular brand or for a particular application. So that is why it is becoming so popular, images. Even text-based content is always going to be an integral part of marketing. What the research data say? It says that 65% of us are visual learners, right? We learn by seeing. So see and learn. So according to this social science research network, but 90% of information that comes to the brain is visual in the form of imagery. And 40% of all our nerves are connected to the brain and are linked to the retina. So obviously the brain processes visual information 60,000 times faster than the text information. So that is why the processing is much faster, the decision making is much faster, the research data is showing this. Hence we are having the popularity of image data. So now the concept that we are trying to emphasize is image processing versus deep learning. So are they really synonymous? So if it is synonymous, then there is no point discussing. If it is not synonymous, then where from the question comes that one is replacing the other? These two are entirely different things. If this is so, then how they will replace one another? So how come deep learning comes into picture in that case? On that, where lies the question of making image processing relevant with deep learning, right? So let us try to investigate that. So if we try to investigate that, we will find that image processing has got two major applications, right? One application is that you try to make the image comprehensive or comprehensible to the to human beings. So for that we are having good old Adobe Adobe Photoshop, or we are having different image processing software where you can, like, let's say you are having a processing software in your cell phone as well, where you can enhance the contrast, you can enhance the heat, you can enhance the brightness, you can change the different kinds of features, you can use filters. So that becomes more and more soothing to the eyes of the human being. That is one kind of image processing, that is one kind of an application. The second is, let us try to make the image or the scene data comprehensible or understandable to an autonomous machine perception. To create autonomy, to automate a particular thing. Automation is the key word these days. Why? Because we are going through Industrial Revolution 4. So once we are going through Industrial Revolution 4, autonomous offering has become a automatic thing. Creating automatic thing has become a trend. So obviously image processing, the second kind of application which I am saying, that processing of a scene data for an autonomous machine perception has become more and more significant and important, right? So as we can see, there are certain dominant AI application for image processing based on this. If you can have a look here, they are remote sensing, image and data storage for transmission in business application, and then medical imaging, acoustic imaging, forensic sciences, and industrial automation. All of us know that what are the different applications, since we have some way or other done some kind of application in different domain, right? But then what is most important, what we really try to do while we do the application? With the help of the application, what we try to do is that we try to understand, or we try to get some kind of a pattern, some kind of a category, some kind of a similarity among the different images which are being stored, which are being explored, which are being which are being provided as input to the classifier or to the retriever, to understand that what is the pattern which I am looking for. So whatever I am saying, if it becomes too technical, what I am trying to say is that I will again take the example of Google Lens. And so if you are targeting that towards a particular image, what will it do? It will capture the image and then it will try to find out the close match, that let's say of a cap, of a particular perfume, of a television, of an AC, wherever, air conditioner, wherever you take the picture, target it. What it will do? It will take the picture, and then after that in the net it will try to find out the closest match of that picture, and will try to display the options in front of you along with the link of the websites where you can buy these products, right? So that's what is the hello, am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible. Please continue.
You are audible.
So
Please continue.
Yes, sir.
Important here in the different domain that I was showing. If you see in medical imaging, you can have X-ray images, you can have MRIs and different kinds of things to understand that what kind of disease a person can have. You are developing a model, right? You can have forensic sciences for investigation, that what kind of crime it is. Then what exactly is triggering this activity? That is why we are referring to feature, right? So feature everywhere. What does it really means? It means that feature vector is probably the demarcation which differentiates an amateur to a pro. What do I mean by saying this? See, in the domain of image processing, if you are an amateurish person, that is, if you are an amateur who have just now entered or just now venturing into image processing and trying to understand that what exactly image processing is, you will be emphasizing more and more on the output, right? What is the output? That what is the confusion matrix? What is the classification accuracy? What is the retrieval performance? What is the specificity? What is the sensitivity? These things. This is something which are, amateurish people like me, they will try to look at these kind of outputs. So these outputs are something which are the effect, not the cause. So what is the cause? The cause is the processing of the image. That how good you have prepared your image as an input to that particular classifier or retriever. So how will you prepare the image as an input? By extracting feature. So what this exactly means in the first place, that there is something which is called pre-processing and there is something which is called post-processing. So pre-processing is the portion which involves this feature. Feature means the representation of the image, right? So this is what a pre-processing image has been given in front of you. So if you are inserting a scanned image, it probably can go through gray conversion and then certain kinds of filtering and then probably some binarization to create or to differentiate the background from the foreground. Probably the background is not necessary. You are trying to identify an apple and the background is some wall or some paper or whatever it is. So you may eradicate the background, right? So you are doing the binarization to highlight more and more the apple. So this is what is a pre-processing. So once you are doing this pre-processing and providing this apple, right, to a classifier or a retriever, it will provide you with an output, that whether it is an apple or an orange or a banana or whatever, that is post-processing. So the processing, that is the pre-processing, where you are trying to understand eradicating the background, this is no black box system. You will do it hands-on, right? So that is what is the traditional image processing. You will do it hands-on. You will try to understand that what is the threshold, what threshold you will keep to differentiate the background from the foreground. This is what is something on which you are having full control upon. Okay. Then come the panacea named deep learning. So how deep learning is really related to this particular image processing? We have the tendency these days during industry automation or industrial automation or industry revolution 4.0, we are having a tendency of automating everything. So here what we have tried to automate, we have tried to automate this feature extraction part, right? So again, I think I have gone out of town. Am I audible now? Hello?
Yes, sir.
You are audible.
Okay.
Continue. Yes, sir, please.
Audible.
So now, what I am trying to say is that this deep learning thing, we have attempted to make the feature extraction part or the feature extraction portion. We try to automate it with the help of deep learning. That is what is the, that has made it a panacea. Why? Because now the amateurish people like me, they are at great advantage. Why? Because I do not really need to know what is feature, what is the contrast of an image, what will be the region of interest of an image or whatsoever. I do not really, I am not interested in knowing. Why? Because it is a black box kind of a system, and in this black box kind of a system, what you will really have is that you will be, the system will extract the feature for you, the system will predict it for you. So the that's how it becomes a cure for all. So even you become a pro or you become an amateur, it hardly matters. So you just provide the image as an input and it will predict the image for you. So in the recent scenario, image processing and deep learning can hardly be separated. Why? Because you are having the blessings of convolutional neural network that is actually helping you in getting this kind of end-to-end system, and obviously you can gain this added advantage in with the help of deep learning. So that is why it is termed as panacea these days. But is this really the fact? Let us do a fact check. Apparently, it's quite evident. You may find in several literature, you may find in the internet that it is quite evident that your deep learning has performed much more better than any handcrafted technique or any handcrafted method, any handcrafted kind of a feature extraction. But is it really so? So to understand this, to understand deep learning, we need to understand the difference between the descriptive and the predictive analytics. So what is the descriptive analytics is something where you are actually validating the hypothesis that you create with the data that you have collected, right? So you are building a hypothesis based on the data that you have collected, and you are trying to understand that whether the hypothesis holds or not. So that is what is the descriptive analytics, right? So there, if you are, ignoring some kind of a feature, ignoring some kind of a data, so this process becomes very cumbersome, and the process really is precarious because there is always a risk of unmodeled variables, the variables which you have not considered. So obviously the result may come out some kind of an, error. It will provide some kind of an error. That is the descriptive analysis. But we usually do this descriptive analytics on the historical data. But predictive analytics is something where you try to understand the underlying pattern, and based on that you predict something, right? So deep learning, which is a subset of machine learning, rejects the traditional programming. Why? Because machine learning is something where you do certain things without explicitly programming it. So obviously in deep learning, it rejects the traditional programming paradigm where the problem analysis is replaced by a training framework. So you are not supposed to do any kind of analysis, problem analysis in this framework, because it is a black box kind of a system, as I have already told you. So what will happen? You will have plethora of images, it will train the system, they will understand the pattern, and based on that they will try to predict the pattern. So that is what is the essence or the significance of deep learning. But it has got certain dependencies, right? Like the computing power, as we all know, the memory capacity, the power consumptions, and the image sensor resolution and optics. Means the kind of light it is having, the image it is having, how prominent it is, or how blur it is, or how hazy it is, the sensor resolution by which it is being captured, the power that is being consumed during execution of this deep learning, the memory capacity of your machine, and the computing power. Being said all these things, if I term these things as bottlenecks, right? These are no more a bottlenecks these days, for at least for the research purpose at the academics level. Why am I saying this? Because if you are really aware of the open source languages like Python or R, you can leverage these facilities, or you can have these facilities free of cost with the help of Google Colab, right? So in Google Colab, you can easily, you are having a GPU free of cost, you are having a TPU free of cost, you are having the entire interface free of cost, the cloud free of cost, and you can carry out complex kind of computations in deep learning and machine learning. But then still, while you are thinking of a scaled up application, then you need to face this kind of a scenario, and you need to have large investment based on this, which may not be feasible for certain kinds of problems. Let us see. What is the good old feature extraction? We are having different feature extraction techniques like this SIFT, SURF, BRIEF, etc. These are the different feature extraction techniques. So that you will find which are state of the art, right? Scale invariant feature transform. So this is what is SIFT, right? So SURF, BRIEF, these are all different varieties by which the traditional approach is being used for feature extraction. What is happened? Some kind of bag of words is being created with the help of this kind of features. There are several feature extraction algorithms like this, which are based on edge detection, corner detection, or probably threshold segmentation even, that I said that you can differentiate the foreground and the background. So this was before the emergence of deep learning. What we used to do, we used to extract feature with this kind of feature extraction techniques, and the most popular super classifier was at that point of time was SVM, that is support vector machine, and we used to deploy this in support vector machine, or probably at times on random forest or stuff like that. So there is a technique of forming the efficient feature in this handcrafted method, that is at the deployment stage these definitions are searched for each of the images. So you can, image is a rich variety of feature. as many features as practicable you can extract with all these techniques or with some of these techniques. You can combine these features, you can use these features separately, you can reduce the dimension of these features with PCA or LDA or stuff like that, and then these features from the definitions can be used to find out the similar kind of most closest match of these features in the other images or in the test images, and they can be listed one after another based on the handcrafted technique. So you can identify finally that what is a chair, what is a horse, what is an apple, what is a banana, and stuff like that, and the image is classified in the process. So this was the technique earlier. What was the bottlenecks? The bottlenecks was of the traditional kind of feature extraction is that the number of classes to classify increases. As soon as it increases, feature extraction become more and more complex. This is but obvious, because you are having huge varieties of classes. You will be you will require to iterate through huge varieties, and then you are extracting the features, and probably some classes which are very similar, they will be having very similar kind of features, which may lead to some kind of overfitting. The difficulty is that the CV engineer need to judge, that is the computer vision engineer need to judge, and the person need to optimize the feature manually to understand that how to get the best possible differentiation or the demarcation line that we usually do in SVM, that is how to get the optimal plane, right? That is the hyperplane, optimal hyperplane in SVM that we look for. So the CV engineer need to figure out in the features in such a way that the best or the optimal hyperplane for differentiation can be drawn or can be deployed on the test data that you have inserted. Moreover, each feature definition requires dealing with a number of parameters. So these were certain bottlenecks. Then comes the one-stop solution in the form of deep learning. But then is it true that deep learning is the one-stop solution? Deep learning requires huge amount of images. You might have heard of the pre-trained networks, right? So there are n number of pre-trained networks which I can provide you certain examples with. One is earlier one where VGG16, then came VGG19, then there is AlexNet, then there is EfficientNet. Now there is B7 of EfficientNet starting from B0. There is NASANet. There is this what you call MobileNet V2. Earlier there was version V1, and there are these are several kinds of these kind of pre-trained networks are there in convolutional neural network. These networks, pre-trained networks, are actually being trained on ImageNet datasets. The ImageNet dataset will get that how big this ImageNet dataset is on which this kind of training has been done, so that the weights are saved, and based on this, if you deploy this on a smaller database, they can extract. You did not have to train the neural network from scratch. These weights can extract important features. So one is already trained in the same kind of task, so it can extract the features, this pre-trained network, for you. And with this feature, you can add one classifier at the end of the network, which will create an end-to-end connection, and you will get the classification result. That is what is the usual structure of deploying neural network in case of image processing. But then it makes the entire process automated, and it helps in end-to-end learning. This is so far so good. This is absolutely great kind of a setup that one can ever have. So there is no distinction between pro and amateur in this kind of a setup. So that obviously led to the popularity of deep learning in this context, and you can have trade-offs between the different kinds of processing time, because as you know, these images are very rich images, and deep learning network require huge amount of processing time. But then, as I have said, you can make a trade-off. If you are aware of Python and this kind of languages, you can use this Google Colab or platforms like this, where you will get free GPU and the processing is much faster, right? So you will get in minutes, and your computer is not really responsible for this. You will be computing in the Google setup, right? So obviously you will be having much more computation power. Hence the deep learning has gone more and more popular with the advent of this open source culture, and all are open source, everything is for free, so it is getting popular. So in CNN, what is there? The kernel tree. So for each feature, let's say you are smiling, you are not so happy, how your eyebrows will be, how your mouth will be, how your nose will be. For each of these, they are having a kernel design. Kernel is nothing but a small matrix, right? So this matrix will actually extract specific features, that is specific type of feature, whether you are smiling, whether you are angry or stuff like that, and that is actually optimizing more and more the accuracy of classification. But then this kind of kernel trick, while I am referring to deep learning, you also had experienced while you have dealt with, let's say, the morphological operator, right? So in morphological operator you have these small kinds of matrices or small kinds of elements which are known as structuring elements, right? You might have heard of structuring elements in morphological this thing, morphological processing, that is finding out the shape of a particular figure on an image. So this structuring element are also doing this kind of dot product or this kind of multiplications. These are not exactly matrices, but these are of different shapes. But these kernels which are in CNN are matrices, right? So it's not that it is doing something new, but in a novel way. Okay. So what are the recent obstacles which we faced or we have faced with deep learning? We have faced in this COVID season several kinds of obstacles with deep learning. We tried to create an automated system, isn't it? All the countries across the world tried to create automated system with the help of deep learning, with the help of machine learning in COVID. So if we talk in terms of image processing, with the help of chest access, people tried to create different types of system, automated CAD, computer aided diagnostic system for identifying the COVID. But then what happened? The false positive rate gone so high that people who do not have COVID are being detected as COVID. People who are having COVID are being detected as normal or pneumonia, normal pneumonia kind of patient. So that has even enhanced the mortality rate. Until date, there is no good system of COVID, being developed with the help of this deep learning technique. Why? Because deep learning technique requires something, a training from number of images of the same category from which you try to extract the feature. For COVID, the number of images are otherwise less. So people are using this ImageNet database for the pre-trained network. So what is the constituent of the ImageNet database? The constituent is nothing but different types of trucks, buses, cars, Apple, and these kinds of normal everyday things we look around. They are not COVID images. Hardly there is any pre-trained network for medical imaging. So for these rare kind of diseases, for epidemic, for pandemic, if you try to apply deep learning technique, you will be in a deep trouble, because of the fact deep learning technique do not have enough data to extract or to accumulate good features from the COVID-19 chest X-rays, because they have never seen this earlier, and they actually train to extract class specific features, right? So what will happen? What is the way out? Here, if you take the example of SIFT, or if you take the example of binary pyramid structure, or if you take the example of local binary pattern, so they are not this, they extract very generic kind of a feature, whether it is a COVID image. So you get a very generalized kind, generalization is the key, right? Whatever feature you extract, if the classifier is able to generalize it, then only you get a good confusion matrix, then only you get a good accuracy, then only you get a good F1 score, a precision and a recall, right? On that, you see this COVID datasets or this kind of rare kind of image datasets which are having rare kind of images, rare kind of images of animals or of diseases or of different kinds of things like this. These are highly imbalanced dataset. So you need to really take care of class balancing while you are handling this dataset. If you are directly doing a classification and retrieval, the results are all erroneous. So it has absolutely got no significance, right? So then on that, if you are doing class balancing, you will find that you are not even getting at points of time precision or recall values. So that absolutely makes no sense in case of deep learning in this case. Here, if you are using a combination of deep learning to the handcrafted technique, or the handcrafted technique itself in some cases, which can generalize well, which can provide you with great results, right? So there lies the way out. So deep learning in this case, you have found that you try it today itself, that you will not get great results. You try it with the COVID-X dataset, which is having almost, let's say, 20,000 images on the whole, along with COVID images to be classified. You will not be able to get a very good result. So that's why COVID-Net is being developed. COVID-Net is in preparation. It is always, it is right now COVID-Net pre-trained network is being developed every day. so that one can have good recognition of COVID images, because you do not have any pre-trained network of COVID. So you can understand that how severe bottleneck lies with deep learning and how misguidance it can create for you and for those patients who are serious patients. So there you need to have some kind of a generalized kind of a feature extraction, where handcrafted feature probably can come to your rescue. I will show you certain examples. So that's why it is being suggested you are supposed to act like a pro, right? You are supposed to act like a pro means professional. You need to be judgmental that where I need to apply what, right? So here one example is given to classify two classes of product on an assembly line, one with a red paint and the other with a blue paint. You may think of using deep neural network, but then that is absolutely of no use. You just use a threshold by which you can differentiate blue and red. That will create a much more lightweight kind of an application. Why at all you go for deep learning? So that's what is acting like a pro. That's what is your maturity. That where actually you are thinking of applying deep learning, where you are thinking of applying handcrafted or traditional image processing, if at all it is required or not. So how you respond to your surroundings around, how you respond to the real life scenario, that will actually make you a professional or a pro. Not just by learning deep learning you will become a pro and people will embrace you. It's nothing like that. If your deep learning is not really working to scenarios like this, then no one will really embrace you, right? So there are certain criticisms, as I was saying, for deep learning. It is just like a black box. You do not know what is getting really inside, what is going on in the hidden layer and what is coming out. So that is why there are several criticisms of deep learning technique. I am not saying this is good or bad, but people have criticized it. There are same kind of criticism which are available for your handcrafted techniques as well. So but then compared to deep learning, where you cannot see what kind of feature is being extracted inside the black box, here you are having certain positive sides. You are having the full control on the entire thing, and the computer vision engineer can have insights that for what problem, what kind of feature can be optimized, what kind of feature has to be extracted. If you are looking for shape, so obviously you will be going for morphological technique. If you are looking for separating the background, probably you will be going for thresholding technique. So like this. But in case of deep learning, you are not the master. You just provide the image as an input and you never know what is going to happen, right? And in deep learning, if you try to optimize it by optimizing the different tuning the parameters, so there are n number of plethora of parameters, you may not be aware because you are an image processing person, you are not a neural network person, right? So these two are entirely different. So what I was saying in the beginning, that are they synonymous or not, these two are not really synonymous. Image processing is something different, deep learning is something different. Image processing is pre-processing, deep learning is post-processing, right? So what can be certain innovative usage? You see, I have written that combining deep learning and handcrafted techniques, right? So there is a portion in deep learning. Why deep learning is so good at? Because deep learning itself can extract features. Fine. Why don't you use deep learning in the form of representation learning, where it is only being used to extract the features from the images, and then you take out those features from that particular layer. That is what is representation learning, and combine it to the handcrafted layer. Let's say for your COVID images, why don't you do this trick? So probably it can have better accuracy by combination, or else you can also use deep learning, or you can also use the neural networks to, let's say, to segment certain images, to create better segmentation, so that you can have better feature extraction with the help of handcrafted scenario in case of unknown images like this. Let us see an example. This is an algorithm. This algorithm, if you go through the algorithm, it is stating that we are trying to divide an images into 16 parts, right? And from these 16 parts, we are trying to select certain parts with a threshold. So we are selecting the threshold first, and then we are trying to select the parts of those images which are really contributing in extracting robust feature which will affect the classification decision. So out of 16 parts, let's say if I extract or if I separate 8 parts with the help of this algorithm, probably these 8 parts are helping me more to extract features, right? So this is what is the algorithm for that. So I can use it in a systematic way, I can use it in a random way. In a systematic way, how am I using with the help of this algorithm? I am providing the parts of the images as an input to an autoencoder. You must be aware of autoencoder if you are aware of deep learning. So autoencoder is something which is unsupervised kind of a feature extraction is being done with autoencoder. So in autoencoder, the input neuron are number of input neurons are equal to number of output neurons, and it is usually used for image compression. So one end if you are providing an input, at the other end you are getting an output, reconstructed output. So if I am providing all these image portions, segments which I have divided equal segments, let's say I have divided 16 segments, if I provide all the 16 segments as input, I will be having a reconstructed segment on the other end. Now I will calculate that what is the reconstruction error, and the segment having the maximum reconstruction error is having the maximum variation, which will help me to get the robust feature. So I will segregate that particular segment as one of the segment useful for feature extraction. How will I do that? I will calculate the error with the help of MAC. So I will sort the MAC based on the threshold, and I will differentiate the different portions of the images, right? So let us see the example. So this is the original image in front of you, and as you see, the arrow is showing that it is being divided into 16 parts, right? So once it is divided, then the threshold is applied to 50%, and you see these portions are retained. Then a threshold of 25%, these portions are retained for feature extraction. Rest of the portions are discarded, and then to two partitions, that is 12.5%. Finally, it has been reduced, right? So you see, instead of extracting features from the second one, that is all the 16 portions, I may extract from 8 portions, or from 4 portions, or for 2 portions, by identifying which portions are most significant. How I am doing this? I am identifying these portions with the help of autoencoder. This is another innovative application of deep learning, which is being used for segmentation, neither for feature extraction nor for classification, right? So here what I have shown, the results, as you can see, that you are having color histogram, ULBP and fused feature. So these two, once the the partitions, you see, it is with the increase, you can see there are good results. If you take it random, the results are not that good. So only with the help of this kind of scenario you can have good results. So this is a kind of example which I have given, and the result comparison is there in front of you, right? So once you are having this result comparison in front of you, you can readily understand that how good image processing will be for you. This is another example where it is being given for dermoscopic images, and these are the things, that is how autoencoder weights are extracted from these images, and how you can use these weights for as feature, right? So here is the entire block diagram which is being shown to you. 3 features are being extracted. One is color histogram, another is hog, then autoencoder, and then finally single feature wise feature extraction is being classification is being done, and then fused feature classification is being done to see which results better. So here is the result in front of you. Specificity and sensitivity is being calculated, and as you can see at the last, that fusion of color histogram and automated features have yielded this result, that is 89% of specificity and 57% of sensitivity, and fusion of hog and automated feature has even resulted in higher one. So this fusion have created higher results, as you can see here, 94% and 73%. So this is another innovative use of deep learning, where it is being used for extracting features, not for end-to-end classification, right? So this probably may be useful while you are dealing with situations which deep learning models are not familiar with, and in this way you can overcome the bottleneck, and you can act like a pro, that where to use deep learning and where to use a handcrafted feature. So that is why I am saying that it is never no knowledge is waste, or no knowledge is extra. Every time you can gain important information, and it is worth learning from all the generations of knowledge and innovation. And knowledge can give you more intuitions and tools, and you must embrace innovation, and you must keep an open mind which can bring disruption as technocrats and researchers in you, and not just as someone who is a slave of certain tools, right? So I usually disseminate different kind of information. This is Curious Neuron, my own YouTube channel, where I have disseminated several information related to research, related to machine learning, and certain things like that. You can always visit. The link is there in front of you, given in front of you. This is the link. So you can always subscribe to this. You can always get into this channel to understand what are the things are, right? And you can even get in touch with me that what kind of video you want. And this is my web presence, that is my web page. Here is the link for my web page, that is dasweek78.wixsite.com portfolio. So you can really get into if you are interested in knowing what I have really done throughout my entire career and what are the things I'm currently doing, those all are enlisted in my website. So you can see here what are those. So this is the link. You can click here and you can visit my website at any point of time. Hope you have enjoyed this session, and hope you have got some kind of insight, and I have probably been able to add some value. I don't know how much, but then I have attempted my best to add some kind of value to the kind of existing interaction that we had. And I thank all of you for your patient hearing and patient listening, and also to the management and the arrangers in PCCOE as well as IEEE student chapter for this wonderful podium and opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I request participant to ask the question if any queries are there.
Yeah, I'm open for questions now. If anyone would like to ask any question, I'm ready to respond as far as possible. Yeah. Thank you for your appreciation, but then any question is there? Anyone would like to ask any question? Okay, how deep learning is used in Python? Well, see, in Python, deep learning is using deep learning is much more easier than MATLAB. I would rather say you. In Python, what will happen is that you are having several packages, right, of deep learning. You need to import those packages. So if you just type it and you try to use Python online in browser with the help of, let's say, Jupyter Notebook, you can also download Anaconda, in which you can find that this Jupyter Notebook is there. And you try to implement Python in Google Colab. So in Google Colab, once you enter that, in Google Colab, you will be having a hands-on, training. In fact, hands-on training on this entire deep learning thing that is enlisted and written in Python in Google Colab. You can readily learn from there and can deploy it. So this is great in Python if you want to really use this. Your image processing and machine learning. Yeah. Next question. Okay, what is the future of deep learning? Well, future of deep learning, for that matter, if you yes, Google Colab is online for Python. Yes, you can have Jupyter Notebook there. Well, future of deep learning is something which is which you really cannot predict right at this point of time, because deep learning, as long as we are in the age of narrow AI, it is fine. But then as soon as we enter the age of AI, which we are envisioning at, where AI will be as good as human brain, then deep learning can be dangerous to us, because these machines can have greater insights than us. So that is jokes apart or reality apart, which we are far away from this fact. But deep learning is really going to be much more significant and much more contributing in coming times. With the help of, you must browse something which is one-shot learning or zero-shot learning, right? So these things where you do not have any kind of, this is a special case of transfer learning in deep learning. So where you do not have any instances, how will you train certain things with the help of deep learning? So deep learning really is going to come up in a big way, and these are certain things which are into much more practice, that is one-shot learning and zero-shot learning, as well as now deep learning is also getting integrated with quantum computing, and quantum machine learning is coming up in a big way, but then it is a crawling technology. Yeah. Deep learning, deep learning, then traditional image processing. Okay. Yeah, definitely in deep learning, see, specific feature extraction you cannot say like that, because you are not exactly extracting the feature. It is a pre-trained network which is extracting the feature for you, right? So what you can do is that currently EfficientNet is the latest one, and it is doing very good feature extraction. You can try out EfficientNet for feature extraction, or even you can try out MobileNet V2, right, or NASANet for feature extraction. So that will give you really good features to classify or to retrieve images. Yeah.
इसका सेट करेगा हाँ एक अच्छे से
Any more question?
यही पे तू
Acha, okay. Someone is asking, sir, please differentiate ML, deep learning, and AI. Okay, great. You see, I will be happy to differentiate these three. Well, machine learning is something where you are doing or instructing the machine to do certain actions without explicitly programming the machine. You are not really putting the explicit instruction that what to learn and what not to learn. It is the machine which is learning it on its own, right? So that is what is the machine learning. What is deep learning? Deep learning is a subset of machine learning, which is acting as a black box. So in machine learning, at times you are extracting the features and putting the features as a representation of the image, and then you are getting the result, right? That is machine learning. But in deep learning, you directly put the image. So the deep learning network will extract the feature for you and will predict the image for you. So it is a subset of machine learning. But AI is a much larger term. AI is artificial intelligence, which encompasses everything: machine learning, deep learning, text processing, and then prediction, and then probably so anything which is artificially intelligent, which can emulate, right? So that is what is known as AI, and in these days we are living in the age of narrow AI, which can only do some kind of tasks like differentiating spam, which are not spam, which is yes, which is no, or these kind of things. If a letter comes to you that I will not be able to come today, I will come tomorrow, will it be okay with you? The machine will not be automatically able to answer it, because the machine do not have the empathy till now, right? So that is what is the differentiation between AI, ML, and deep. Is character recognition techniques available in deep learning? Yes, of course they are available. You just have the demo with MNIST dataset, right? ORIA characters can recognize by AI easily. There are several words you can visit of their, detecting ORIA character. You can always visit archive.org for that. You will find plethora of applications of deep learning, recognizing ORIA characters. Yeah, Mr. Jogeshwar. Would you be a little bit clear how machine learning code flush in hardware device means? What are you trying to ask exactly? I mean, how they get exhausted? Yes, ML or AI, deep learning are definitely parts of AI. Okay. How machine learning code flush in hardware device means what? How they get exhausted? Okay. See, machine learning code hardly get flushed in your this particular hardware unless and until the features you have provided them are very heavy. So for example, in deep learning, let's say you are extracting features in your offline machine. Let's say you are extracting feature for 20,000 images, and the dimension of each feature, let it be 4096. Let's say you have extracted with the help of BGG19 layer, fully connected to FC2 layer. So you will have 4096 features, that is 4096 columns by 20,000 rows. Now if you try to deploy it in MATLAB in your normal machine, your machine hardware will flush out. Why? Because it will require special kind of GPU for really getting processed this kind of a thing. But then you have deploy this same feature, you don't, these days people do not engage their own hardware. You deploy the same feature in Google Colab, right, where you will get free GPU offered by Google. So you can visit my website as I have shown you, and you can go to the blog section. There you will find I have written a blog on Google Colab, step by step how to use it. It is being published by Analytics India magazine. There also you will get the link. So once you do that, you will be able to understand that how really your hardware is not getting flushed out, and you are also able to get the insights, right? So please try to depend more and more on the cloud rather than being dependent on your own offline machine. Don't do that. Right now, you rather shift to cloud, shift to online computing, shift to online programming habits, because offline is not going to help you anymore, yeah, with the kind of requirements coming up. Hello.
More question,
Anything else?
please?
great.
Hello.
Yeah, hello.
Thank.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank
Thank
you.
you for giving valuable insights.
Thank you, ma'am.
You
Sonali,
talked
madam.
about how to go ahead with research,
Yeah.
uh, how to go ahead with the research. Basic algorithms cannot be replaced for image processing in spite of selecting any platform or any technology like deep learning. If you are using deep learning for imaging work, their roots are there in image processing only. Applications area of deep learning and image processing you have explained very well. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Now I request Professor Jaya Divan Madam to propose the vote of thanks.
Respected Rita sir and all the participants. Am I audible?
Yes, yes, madam.
Yeah. It's my privilege to have been asked to propose a vote of thanks on this occasion. I, on behalf of Information Technology Department, Cambridge Institute College of Engineering, and the VIBE, that is Video Image Biometric Enhancement SIG team, extend a very hearty vote of thanks to our today's speaker, Dr. Rita sir. Sir mentioned about the various image processing algorithms which cannot be neglected in the era of deep learning. The way he explained the topic is exemplary. Thank you, sir. I also wish to express my gratitude to our principal, Dr. N.B. Chopre, sir, for providing the encouragement and support. I am very grateful to Dr. Sonali Patil, ma'am, Head Information Technology Department, for giving us an opportunity to organize this event. Thank you, ma'am. I heartily congratulate all the participants for their active participation in this event, as no program can become successful with a single person. So I my big thanks to our live team for their support. Thank you guys for making this event successful with your coordination. The feedback link and the attendance link will be shared in the chat window. With this, the webinar comes to the end. All the participants are requested to fill the attendance cum feedback form. The participation certificates will be emailed to you by 6th of June 2020. Thank you all.